What's up, guys? I'm Alex.
I'm Jason. We're the Table Monkeys, and we are back with another video. Today, we are going to be starting a new series. It's kind of a continuation of the last series we did. We called Starting from Zero, which we went over the real basics of establishing your position at the table and sort of defining the difference between hooking and top rolling as far as like coming forward versus going backwards. So this series we're going to call Advancing Your Game. And the idea is going to be to take a sort of more in-depth look and really get into the nitty-gritty of the hook and the top roll. So the idea is you're, more than a few months in now, you kind of understand both of them. You know which one you're better at, which one you need to work on. And this first video is going to be about the hook, called A Deeper Look.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about it from the lens of this is if both people are hooking, right? So we're both committing forward in a hook with our cups, and we're trying to advance our position in the hook. We're not trying to reverse our opponent's hook, or stay away from it by
or trap a top roller in a hook, right? Like a lot of the times when we talk about these moves, we talk about how they counter each other and how they work together, which is a huge part of arm wrestling. But the hook is really unique, which is why you always hear the expression, deep inside, and that people love. Like people that love the hook think it's like the sort of
purest
form of arm wrestling. Thank you. Right. Yeah. So a lot of that comes because the hook versus hook is sort of the only one where you can really have that real battle. Like if you have a serious top roll versus top roll, you either have like a flash sort of happen at the beginning, like Hermes versus Kardeccia, right? Or you have a balance point like Hermes versus Dave or Levon, which then the balance point transfers to a counter where one or the other opponent has to start. Dave versus Vitaly, right? Like both top rolling balance point met. Now someone has to commit and go to the other part of the hill to try to find a different tactical, advantage. But the hook is really unique in that, like we're saying, Alex said in this video we're going to talk about, it can really just be, both inside fighting for that battle and like why a lot of people call it that will test your frame, and again the purest form of arm wrestling. So that's what we really want to talk about. And the first thing in understanding the hook is understanding the bone line, which is something that really eluded me in the beginning, and we think we figured out a good way to explain it. So let's try to convey this message.
Yeah. So you can usually tell if both people are going to hook based on their setup, right? Because they've got their shoulder forward. They're both carving, trying to get a deep hand position on your opponent, because a deeper hand will allow you more access to your cup, and carve will allow you to, carve is going to help you with your bone line. So what is bone line? Bone line is the line from your shoulder to your wrist.
Right.
And in an ideal situation, the line between my shoulder and my wrist cuts into my opponent's arm. So it's cutting past his shoulder this way.
Yeah.
So typically, when people are setting up for a hook, they'll both start carving, trying to get a great position. The ref will not allow us to start this way, so we'll have to rotate out
and turn out
to where our bone lines are more even and in a good start or safe starting position.
Yeah, an equal or fair starting position would be our bone lines cutting into each other's bodies. So my bone line is cutting into Alex's chest. Alex's bone line is cutting into my chest. We're more or less square. You might need to bring that shoulder a little bit forward. But for the most part, that's square, again, where our bone lines are cutting into each other's body. And now on the go, as we said, all hooking is basically trying to establish cup and establish shoulder position forward. So we both cup and come forward. I get the better position in the sense that my bone line is now cutting into Alex's arm or into free space out here, and his bone line is still cutting into my body, right? So again, this is establishing bone line position, and that's the first thing that you need to do in getting a hook. And the other thing you can see is that my hand is more or less on top of his hand. I've got a little bit more pronation than he does. If he had a little more pronation like this would be like, now it looks more like hook top roll position where he's setting up for a reversal. So now I haven't really, even though I've committed to try to get bone line, I haven't gotten enough cup and hand position. So again, you have to get some hand position and you have to get shoulder position to get an advantage, right? So that's bone line, and that's the first thing you need to do is establish bone line.
Yeah, and then once you're in a match, you can always improve your hand position, doesn't matter what move you're doing. Now in a hook, like we said, you want to get deep around your opponent, and height is always an important thing to achieve. So always be climbing, whether that's top roll or hook.
Yeah.
So in the hook, you obviously you've got established into the hook.
And your standard way of climbing would be like trying to advance on my thumb upward, right? So he might be, just climbing up that way, trying to gain more position. Again, still with where he has the bone line position, but that's the standard way. The more advantageous way with a hook is to try to get further past. So height through depth.
Yeah. So height, supination, and getting further around my opponent's hand. This will obviously bring my opponent down my hand, forcing him kind of into a bit of a dad move. But now I have much more control over my opponent's hand. He's weaker, I'm stronger. Yeah. All the good things.
The main thing that you're trying to do with improved hand position is improve leverage. And once you improve leverage, then it makes every other thing that you're trying to do more effective, right? So one of the drills that we like to do with this bone line thing in practice and just kind of learning how to fight in the hook. And we're going to kind of demo the drill and then explain the sort of pressures that we're using to go through it. But the idea is one of us is going to take bone line position. So I've got bone line and Alex is in a defensive position. And you've probably seen this in matches too, where people are really sticky in a defensive position. Like just because your opponent has gotten the bone line position doesn't mean that you're in an advantage. This could be a great way, if you know your defensive hook is strong enough, to force your opponent to wear himself out, getting excited over the fact that he's won bone line position and start to pull himself out of position. Ready, go. Into the hook. Costantini and Sadler.
Patience, patience. Patience, patience.
Costantini holds and makes his move. Sadler's still confident because it is shoulder forward position. Yes, sir! Get him! Yes! Costantini trying to finish now, but Sadler is in a strong position. Looking to defend with that shoulder now. Get it in! Costantini can't quite get it! Sadler's moving to a bounce! Yeah! But in the drill that we do, it's again, strong man holds, weak man works. It's not that one is stronger or weaker here, but we basically have a holder and then a worker, and then we alternate back and forth. So the person who gets bone line position holds. And now Alex is going to start to work, and I'm just holding at a light pressure, and he now gets bone line position. And now he holds, and I start to work. And again, you can work in different ways to establish your bone line position back. And then again, I'm just going to hold for him and let him establish bone line position. And there's a lot of different ways for you to win this bone line position back. And that's what we want to talk about next, is those kind of specific moves, because that's where it really becomes like a fight. You know, to me, it's so much like boxing. The main thing that we want to attack is the joints in arm wrestling, right? Yeah, and we have three.
Three main joints are going to be the wrist, the elbow, and the shoulder. So we talked about a little bit about attacking the hand, where you're trying to get deeper and further up your opponent's hand.
Yeah.
Now, and then attacking your elbow, or my opponent's elbow and my shoulder and his shoulder, will also help me improve my hand position and weaken his hand position.
Yeah.
But just for this sake, just forget about the hand. Because that's going to be kind of involved no matter what.
And in reality, the hook is sort of a move that's meant to get past the hand. So again, if you're going into a tournament and you know your opponent has a much stronger hand than yours, but your arm is better or comparable to his, your best bet is going to be to try to get past his hand and get into a hook, which is why, again, in our very basic explanation of the three, the hook is going past the hand. Mm-hmm. The top roll, the low hand and posting are trying to go around or through the hand in a different way. But the idea of the hook is past the hand so we can get arm to arm. So the majority of the moves that you're doing in the hook are going to attack either the elbow flexion or the shoulder. Mm-hmm. But again, relating it to fighting, I love to think about it as like the head, the body, the legs. You know, the tactic might be go in and leg kick your opponent until he gets tired, so then you can, and then throw some body shots, so then you can take his hand. Arm wrestling is kind of, or kick him in the head and knock him out. Arm wrestling is kind of the same thing, right? And once you've done this bone line game a bit, you start to understand how you're attacking your opponent's arm, and then you'll start to also feel that once you get far enough away and attack his arm enough, even if you can't finish him here, all of a sudden his hand is so much more susceptible because of the work you've done on the other two joints. You think about those three joints and how you attack them, and for the hook, these are the three main ways you attack it.
Yeah, so we've got how do you attack your opponent's elbow and shoulder. How do you attack the opponent's elbow? You're gonna drag, right? So dragging will help me open up my opponent's bicep, and I'm trying to use the entire pad here, so I'm going from my top left corner to my bottom right hand corner, while obviously keeping my shoulder close and my cup engaged.
And he's using a lot of lat when he does that. It's mainly lat that's pulling through.
And the reason this works is because the lats are typically stronger than biceps. Exactly. So I should be able to do this against an equal strength opponent. And then there's driving. So this is more about going to the side, attacking my opponent's shoulder, getting my opponent's hand outside their shoulder, right? So this obviously can be used as a combination. Push to the side, drag, push to the side, drag back, and just continually weaken and open up my opponent in various different ways.
Yep.
And then if that doesn't work, your opponent is still too super sticky, you can commit to the press where you're getting your shoulder as far behind your hand as possible, where you're now in the most advantageous position you can be, where you can now just press down on your opponent's hand using your entire body to press on their elbow, on their shoulder.
And that would kind of be the last pressure. So if we've got the dragging pressure to attack the bicep and the driving pressure to attack the shoulder, the driving pressure can also kind of attack the pronation a little bit if their shoulder's really strong and keeps them there. If you're pushing hard enough, usually you end up turning their hand over more, and that opens up for them to be drug out, or for you to drag out on their bicep. But the driving pressure and the dragging pressure, the last one, like Alex talked about, is a sort of a pushing pressure. So you're not, again, in arm wrestling, you're never really trying to be dynamic with the movements. You're trying to get locked and then use your body to, establish the movement. And that's the same with this push, is you get enough position past your opponent's wrist and your shoulder committed enough that now you can kind of push your body down on your arm. Or I like a defensive way to use it if someone's trying to drag on you, is you can kind of push up. So it's the push can either be up to get position, which is similar to the hand position movement, or once you've got that position, to push down. So again, drag, drive, or push are your kind of three pressures that you can play with. And again, if we do that drill again, so I've got position and you get it back, you can see Alex drag a bit, a little bit of push, right? Drag, now he'll probably drive, exactly, and drag, push again. And now he's in a great position. And for me to take it back, maybe, like, for me, sometimes, even though I feel like I'm not in a great position, sometimes the little bit of that Ryan Bowen actually kind of works. Get a little bit here so that then I can drag out a bit and then really push up. And then I like to use this move too, where I just kind of shift my body behind it, right? And then drag out and then shift again. And now I'm in a great position and Alex isn't, and I'll let him work back into a good position.
Yeah, so you can use that drill to experiment with all the different pressures, get used to them, and learn how to combo them to continue to gain position over your opponent.
And the key to it is we're not going hard. You can go hard eventually, even sometimes Mike and I, or you and I, like any of us, will do it at a high intensity, but we're not trying to pin each other. We're just exchanging position, and the exchange is vigorous and tough, but we're not trying to beat each other up. We're not, like, if I'm holding and he leaves a gap, I'm not slamming, trying to hit him to the pad or anything, because we're not in a match. We're trying to train.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because that's a much safer way to train the hook, because the hook can be damaging, right? It's a lot of pressure on the ligaments in your elbow and your shoulder, and if you get ripped open by somebody who's a much stronger hooker than you, you could injure yourself. Or
it's not just muscle giving out, like releasing because it's being overused. It could be actual soft tissue giving out because it's being torn, which is not what you want. I mean, it does happen, but again, in training, as Alex is saying, in order to be safe, if you feel a gap or a looseness all of a sudden and you just blast into it, there's no telling whether that was just because they were relieving pressure or because you actually found a gap in soft tissue that you're now about to blast through and tear, right? So
staying in this zone is a lot safer for both guys, and you can train with more volume, more intensity, and for longer periods of time without having to take time off because you injured yourself.
And actually learn things about the move and find pressures that, again, when you're just blasting through, when you're going 110%, you can't pay attention to what you're really doing. You're just giving her, right? And it's hard to look back and go, like, what was my hand position? Which way was I pulling exactly? Yeah. But when you're doing it like this, you can really feel, because you're able to pay attention, like, oh, it's my pronation that's giving out, that's allowing him to push me this way, or it's whatever, like you can really feel what's going on a lot more, and that allows you to really get a grasp of the whole move. So again, the hook, It's about committing forward. And I guess that's the last thing, the last two things we could talk about, finding the fingers and committing to the press, right? So once you've done all that work, I guess finishing in the hook, Alex kind of already talked about it. If you've got your opponent and he's still really sticky and he's out this way and you can't seem to drag him out, like it's just not working as far as pulling him away from his arm anymore, the best way might be committing yourself forward and then pushing down. If for some reason this isn't a hook battle, it becomes a reversal situation where he's actually in your fingers and that's why you can't finish, and you're coming up to press and he comes out of your hand. This is where the flop comes in, where at that point I don't care about the hand anymore. As long as I can keep my bone line being wrist and shoulder together, I've got a much better position here than if you were trying to maintain your hand position, right? So that's the press. And then the other one would be you're in this position here and I can't get into his arm. I'm not getting him outside his shoulder, but I feel like his hand might be where he's weaker, like he's all about his shoulder and hand. I can kind of push up into his fingers. So now I'm not trying to reverse him and top roll him. I'm just trying to distract his hand, which will take some of his focus off his arm. And this might allow me to now push him out or drop back in and drag him down. And so that can be another way, like kind of throwing a jab is just, so I'm not committing to a top roll. Like we're both hooked here. I'm just kind of rising through the low part of my hand,
essentially going up the hill
for more of a high hook. Yeah, exactly. And
establishing more rise, gaining your pronation, and putting the pressure in my fingers.
Similar to a jab, again, it's more of a distraction. If he now, like if I do this and he drives hard to the side, that might allow me to take more hand position this way or get up over his arm more that way. Like I'm forcing him to now make an adjustment.
Yep.
So those are the other two kind of things you can do. They don't work as well in that drill. They're more for finishing. So again, the drill, think about the drive, drag, and push. And then for finishing, you've got find the fingers or commit to the press.
Yeah. So that was the hook, a deeper look. Hope you got some valuable information out of that. If you did, please like the video, leave some feedback down in the comments.
Subscribe, share, all those things. We're going to be back covering the top roll next, so keep your eyes out for that. And I think that's it.
Yeah, monkeys out.
Peace.
If we stop taking chances, you and I might never find the answers. Just one more